Hey everyone, welcome to the Ask Interview series. I'm super excited today to have David Marquet, former captain of a nuclear submarine and the author of a book that is great called Turn the Ship Around. Thank you, David, for coming today.
Thanks, Shane Mack.
Hey, so I want to dive in. I want to go back to, I heard your story, and for people that are going to watch this and haven't heard your story, I want to go back to the time when you thought giving orders was how you lead, and how did you figure out to stop giving orders?
Right. So if you imagine what a nuclear submarine captain is like, most people will picture someone walking around giving a bunch of orders and instructions. And in the world that I grew up in, as I moved up through the ranks in the Navy, this was generally the way the captains were. And I can tell you, I was one of the best guys in the Navy at telling people what to do, and was really good at doing what I was told. And so what happened was I ended up getting selected to be the captain of a submarine, which was a huge event for me in my life. It was really what I wanted. I didn't really care about the desk jobs back in the Pentagon. I just wanted to be a submarine captain. And I was assigned to be the captain of one submarine called the USS Olympia. And I went to school for a whole year to learn about the Olympia. And as I went to the Olympia, I was very confident because having just gone to school for a whole year, I was the smartest guy on the ship. And as the captain who gives the orders, you want that situation. You want to be the smartest guy. What happened was there was another submarine where the captain quit, and that was the Santa Fe. And the Navy looked around and said, well, we need a guy who's been trained up to be a captain. We'll leave the guy on the Olympia now. We'll just leave him there. That was a sort of a scheduled rotation. But now we have this unscheduled event where we need a guy in the Santa Fe. And I had just been trained up, so I said, Marquet, go to the Santa Fe. Now, in addition to being the worst performing submarine in the fleet with the worst morale, it was a different submarine than the Olympia. So when I went down aboard the Santa Fe, I'm looking at the equipment, and it's foreign. It's like being trained on an early 737 and now sitting in the cockpit of a modern-day 737. You just don't recognize the gear. Well, old habits die hard, and so I started giving my, doing what captains do. I took over. I only had 2 weeks, right? So I couldn't learn the ship.
So wait. You took 2 weeks to learn an entire nuclear submarine?
No, I didn't. I know. I took 2 weeks. I learned the people. I went around and asked the people some questions, so I got to try to get a sense of them. But I had no hopes to learn an entire. When I say learn the ship, I mean I could draw the piping systems. I could draw the internals of the pumps. I knew the wiring diagrams. I could find the breakers in the dark. I knew that ship, right? And so Santa Fe was not at all like that. And I gave an order. I started giving orders, and early on I gave an order. Which was essentially the equivalent of shifting into fifth gear for a car that only had 4 gears. And my guys knew you couldn't do it. They knew we only had 4 gears on the Santa Fe, but they ordered it anyway. And then it kind of came back from the engine room. Hey, what are you guys talking about? We only have 4 gears. And then it came to light that this was an order that you couldn't do. And it was embarrassing for me that I gave an order that was incorrect. But what really bothered me was when my guys tried to do it. And that rocked me back on my heels. And I realized at that moment that all this, my whole life, the whole basis of my success in my life to that point, which was giving really good instructions, was flawed, because eventually you're going to make a mistake. Now, because it was magnified because I was on the ship that I didn't know, and the mistake came sooner than I thought. But that's when I realized, don't give orders, like just that. Don't give orders. So I stopped giving orders, and my guys would come forward to me saying, I intend to. Now, this was a relatively long process. Well, it played out basically over 6 months, but they had to take initiative and say, I intend to, and I had to resist the urge to give orders, which was hard, especially when you think you know the right answer. So this kind of flipped my world upside down, and now I'm in this world where everything I thought was good was bad, and everything was bad was good. So, for example, taking control was good. Now taking control was bad. Now I wanted to give control. Pushing information up to the person with the authority was good. Now, pushing information to the authority was bad. Now what I want to do is push the authority down to where the people who natively own the information live. On and on and on and on and on. And so there wasn't a day that went by where I was like, oh my God, what we've been doing is actually the exact opposite of what we want to do. And I think it stems from this change in work, which is work used to be about doing, and now it's about thinking. And when you want to get teams thinking, for me, it's fundamentally different than getting people to do stuff. If I just want you to do stuff, then it doesn't really matter that you know what we're doing. It doesn't really matter that you know why we're doing it. It just matters that I can see you and I can watch what you're doing. I'm in control, and it kind of goes on and on from there. So this is my big epiphany. Now, we did really, really well. This worked really, really well in the submarine, and we won a bunch of awards, and we got great inspection scores, and the morale came up, and we became we had the highest number of people staying in the Navy and all that. But what was really powerful was something that I didn't realize at the time, which was 10 years later, when you look back and you saw how many guys got promoted to be captains of submarines. We had 10 guys promoted to be captains of submarines from that one crew, which was highly disproportional. The average is around 2.8. So we calculated in one day. If it were to happen randomly, it's like a 1 in 100 year experience with a fleet of 50 submarines. So it's you're way out there in terms of standard deviations. And I think for me, because this is how it feels now 10 years later, is that's what feels good to me. I've sort of forgotten about the inspections and I've forgotten about the awards, but the people who tell me now, hey, I'm practicing leadership and making the people around me great, that's what really makes me happy. And I think this goes to another one of the standard failures of leadership, which is, I think too many times the perspective is, I'm going to fix you and make you the kind of person I want. I'm going to make you more generous, more creative, more innovative, more proactive, whatever it happens to be. And I think this is fundamentally the wrong approach. I think the correct approach is, as a leader, my job is to create an environment where you, the way you are, exactly the way you are, can be generous, empathetic, proactive, creative, whatever it happens to be. Because it's always a combination of the personality and the environment. And as much as I try, it's very difficult to fix people's personality. I mean, I can't fix my own personality defects, and God knows I've been trying for 50 years. So basically I kind of went through this thing in my head where I just, every day it was, oh my God, like that's totally wrong. Oh my God, that thing that we've been doing is totally wrong. Oh my God, anyway.
What's an example of changing the environment on a submarine?
Well, on a submarine, as a captain of a submarine, I can control the environment in ways that most business leaders can't. For example, I could raise the actual pressure in the boat. Like when people say we're gonna add some pressure here, they're mostly speaking metaphorically. I could literally do it. I could raise the amount of oxygen in the air and lower the amount of oxygen in the air. But those aren't the things that I did. When I talk about the environment, I mean things like I would preach about taking care of our people. And it was one of the things that most leaders talk about, hey, take care of our people. And the behavior really didn't change that much. My lecturing my guys about taking care of their people didn't cause them to take care of their people. And then one day, we had some event where a guy ran off the ship without permission. It was a big deal. And so I made a rule that the watchstanders lower couldn't be in a worse rotation than the watchstanders higher. So the way we had it in the Navy was the guys down low, would they be working like 6 hours on and 6 hours off, and the guys in the middle would be maybe 6 hours on and 18 hours off. By the time we got to the top, they'd be 6 hours on and 24 hours off, or even more than that. So the idea was you wanted to move up the ranks because you wanted the nirvana of having the easier watch rotation. But the reality was we were just treating the people at the bottom poorly. And so we made a rule that everyone in the whole ship had to be at the same rotation. You couldn't have no one could be better than anybody else. So naturally the guys at the top were really pissed off about this. And I never specifically decided who was going to be on watch or not on watch, but I kind of controlled the system. And with that rule, we ended up with everybody 3 section, which is what the ship is manned for. And then actually we got to everybody being 4 section, which meant every guy on the crew, instead of standing watch 6 hours every 18, was standing 6 hours every 24. So you go out on a 180-day deployment, and now instead of standing 240 watches over 180 days, you're standing only 180 watches. Well, I've just given you a lot of time. And what happens is guys take that time, and my guys, they were taking college classes, they were studying their jobs, they were relaxing, they were getting enough sleep, all those things that they were working out on the submarine, which is hard to do. All those things that you kind of want to do, but when you never have time, they kind of fall away. And so they were very appreciative of that, but also because of that, they were much better performers. They were well rested, they were fit, they were motivated, and they did better work for me. So it was sort of selfish that I said I wanted to treat everyone the same. But it wasn't until we made this rule that people understood, oh, that's what we're talking about.
So I'm really curious too. This is in the Navy, which seems like it probably has some really strict rules.
Yeah.
And it seems like you changed a lot of things. Is the Navy cool with this? Like, are you breaking a bunch of rules to do what you want to do in your way?
It's interesting. There are a lot of rules, and for me, there are 2 kind of rules. And I have a picture of Legos in my head, right? So you have the pile of Legos sitting in the bin, and each one of those individual Legos is a rule, like starting up the reactor, loading a torpedo, preparing the ship to submerge, these kind of things. And we didn't mess with those rules, right? I didn't mess with any of those rules. But then there's like how you assemble those Legos. What do you build with that Lego? And they're like, the sky's the limit. I mean, we've all seen like these ridiculously creative things people make with Legos. The problem was the same rules about how you start up the reactor were applied everywhere. What kind of rice are we going to have for lunch? Brown rice or white rice? Well, who cares, right? And how do we talk to each other? I like this thing with the watch bill. And it turned out, when I looked at it, that there was a lot of room for me to play over here. Things just were not thoughtfully done. In other words, we just sort of, gravity just dragged us, because there's a lot of things you don't want to have happen on a nuclear submarine, right? You don't want to make,
I can imagine.
you don't want water coming into the submarine, all these things you don't want to have happen. But that sort of pulled us to a really strong focus on avoiding all these problems. Not focusing over here. It's like, look, we're going to achieve something really great. Yeah, we're going to minimize the problems, and we're going to make sure we adhere. But making a strong line there. And so the answer is the Navy is cool with it. In fact, the Navy is about to announce that my book's being added to the reading list, the official reading list.
Oh, that's awesome! Congratulations.
Yeah, it's really, and it shows a lot of courage from those guys. But there's a whole thing on military leadership that I think is happening that most people aren't recognizing, that the military has really grappled hard with this issue. And it's not just me. The guys in Afghanistan, whatever success we had over there, was when they got everyone out where they're thinking. They're spreading their troop. They're spreading a squad all over the city. One guy here, 2 guys there. Those guys, to whatever success we had, it was when those guys all were thinking, not just following a set of instructions.
That's incredible. Congrats on your book, by the way.
Thanks.
That's a cool thing to have happen.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a couple more things. One is you talk a lot about achieving greatness. What do you mean by that?
When I think of acts of greatness, to me, there's two characteristics. One is they're always about other people, and they are never ordered. They're never compelled. And we do, sometimes in workshops, we do little activities where we let people think about acts of greatness. Sometimes someone will come up with an example where someone's saving a dog or an animal, but it's usually it's usually a living thing, and it's never something that someone did for themselves, right? Oh, whatever. So to me, and the other thing that strikes me is I like reading these sort of acts of heroism and greatness, and it's always hard ahead of time to identify who the hero is going to be. So that kind of leads me to the idea that everyone has the potential. Everyone has the potential. I call it the inner superhero. Everyone has the potential to do something great, to have a great act. Unfortunately, we're mired in this avoidance mindset. So one of the big failures of leadership is our objective is to avoid whatever, avoid a meltdown, avoid drunk driving, avoid a quality deficiency, avoid losing a customer, whatever it happens to be. It's all measured in avoidance, and that tends to be an uninspiring world, because the best way to avoid doing anything is just not to do anything, and so that there's a bias towards an activity. And our mindset, like as I'm driving to work, if I say, God, I just hope I avoid screwing up today, it's not inspiring, and it doesn't get the best out of people. So we had to say, look, we're here to do something great. Now, I believe that the mission that we had for the submarine was a noble mission. We were there to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. We're not there to cause war. We're not there to kill people. That's the last thing we want. And I felt that mission of supporting and defending the Constitution of the United States was a noble mission. No one's going to get rich off it. We don't make any bonus money if we do better or worse. And so the people who were attracted to that were generally highly noble, moral people. And we just want to make the world a better place. And so that was something we just kind of lost sight of. And all I did was remind them and talked about it a little bit. And said, oh yeah, that's what we're here. We're here to do that. We're here to achieve something, right? Watch any of these superhero movies. Those guys make mistakes all through the movie. Otherwise, it wouldn't be an interesting movie. So they make mistakes, but they still achieve greatness.
Do you have an example of, go the other way of that, a mistake that you made in your life that you learned the most from that you can remember?
Well, certainly given this order on the submarine was a mistake, and then what happened was I had this idea. Well, I got my guys together and we talked about it, and we came up with the idea that I have to give control and keep my mouth shut. The mechanism for me giving control was to keep my mouth shut, because keeping my mouth shut, I couldn't give orders. So we would drive in a straight line until the officers figured out what needed to happen. They would tell me. So in the old day, I'd say, hey, at 10 o'clock, I need you to load a torpedo in this tube. Now they were coming to me and saying, at 10 o'clock, we intend to load a torpedo in this tube. So, but I thought that was all I had to do, was keep my mouth shut and let them have control. And we started making mistakes. And what I learned was it's more complicated than that, unsurprisingly. But we didn't have sufficient, what I now call competence, technical competence in our jobs. If I gave a very specific order, you guys need to load the certain kind of torpedo in a tube at a certain time, we could do it. But they didn't have the degree of training so that they could look ahead and say, this is the kind of torpedo we need loaded at this time. Oh, and so all the orders, which normally the captain gives, load the torpedo, prepare the torpedo, flood down the torpedo tube, open the outer door, all those orders I refused to give. So my guys needed to be thinking like a captain, because they need to be saying, Captain, it's time to flood down the tube. I intend to flood down the tube. I intend to open the outer door. The only order I gave was a final order to launch, because that was the order to kill people, and that was the order that I had to keep in my own, that needed to be on my conscience. But all the other, and there's thousands of these orders, I just refused to give them. Like the supply officer wanted me to sign the menu, like it's supposed to happen on the ship. I said, I refuse to sign it. You sign it. He said, well, what if they don't like the kind of rice I picked? They'll be mad at me. And like, well, yeah, exactly. Well, that quickly morphs into, oh my goodness, I'm actually in charge of my job. I get to make decisions. No one's going to second guess me. And then how much work is that guy going to do? How good is that guy going to be? He's going to become his own leader. So that's what we have. Anyway, the mistake I made was giving control without understanding these things. And my guys went out and they started making a series of mistakes. Fortunately, they're relatively small. Then we had to kind of bring it back a little bit and say, oh, not that much control. And we had a little bit of a dance. And we spent a lot of time on training. And we spent a lot of time also on what I call clarity, which my friend Simon Sinek calls why, which is like, what are we here for, right? If you really understand truly in your bones what we're trying to achieve here, then I can push a lot of authority to you, because the decisions you make are going to be aligned with what we're trying to achieve, unless you're just an evil person, which I didn't have any. And so we had to spend a lot more time on that. But once I did that, I was able to give up all these, like all day long, people wanting to know, do we submerge the ship? Do we turn left? Do I turn right? All that stuff I could get rid of. I got that off my plate. My guys own that.
So if you dig in there, it was giving control without competence was the key missing piece at the beginning?
Correct. Giving control without competence and clarity. Without ensuring competence and clarity sufficient for the level of authority that I give it. So I now think, when I say, okay, you get to make a decision, whatever it is, you're a salesman. In the past, you could sign deals up to $100,000. Now I'm going to give you the authority to sign a deal up to $1 million. And let's say you make a mistake or something that doesn't come out well. The guy who made the mistake there was me, because I was the guy who said, you have the authority to make these deals. And there's something about, why did you make a mistake? You didn't have enough information. You didn't have enough training. You weren't clear on what we're really trying to achieve. You didn't have enough contact. Whatever. All those things are like, I'm responsible to some degree for those things.
Do you think, does this work outside of the Navy? Does this work in anything?
Yeah, 100%. And so, the question is, do you have people? And do you want them to think? If you answer yes to both of those, then it's going to be relevant. And so I've been having some little experiments and things with different companies where we tried the same thing. And some of these have much harder cultures than I had. For example, there's a manufacturing company in Mexico, and they have a pretty top-down culture. I think they've had more. And we're just going very, very slowly. But when you talk to the ground level people, the people who are operating the machines, like you talk to the bosses and they're like, well, I think my people just want to be told what to do. You talk to those people, that's not what they want. You say, well, hey, I got ideas. I don't want to just told. I want to own my future. But it's hard for them because they've been in this cult. They've been acculturated to, oh, that's the Jefe. You don't speak back to the Jefe, and people get fired when they speak back. So there's this long process of building trust. I just came back from China for 10 days. Same deal. I speak to the American Chamber of Commerce, and a lot of these guys are thinking, hey, it's just this won't work in China. And then I go to the university, speak to an MBA group, and I just ask them, well, you guys just want to be told what to do? Of course not. Chinese people just want to be told what to do? No. There are people like people. But there's this long culture for whatever reason, so it's harder there. But
where have you found success?
Go
ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, my thing. I just got back from China, so it's kind of weighing on my head, and it was really an amazing series of events, and I'm kind of still trying to process it all. But this idea that greatness can be anybody, not just the emperor, and what is greatness and can common people be great, never never has that been sort of a concept in China. And do Chinese people just, is there something genetically that makes them want to be just told what to do? Of course not. Look at all the Chinese entrepreneurs that we have, right? So that's obviously makes no sense, but still that sort of sits in our head.
That's crazy. So I'm sitting here just processing, like, so I grew up, my father, and I'm seeing my dad's, been a leader of a company for a long time, and it's in the trades, it's steam fitting. And then you have all these, all of those people are technically competent because they all go to a 5-year trade school. Right. And I just think of like the way you speak and that environment and trying to create this kind of leadership model, because I don't think that's how it is there. It's very much like, here's what you're going to go do it. And I'm just sitting here thinking like, so I send this interview to my dad. Do you think he'll change stuff up? Yeah. Can we shake him up? Maybe he is already doing this. I think he's, changed his style a lot over the years, but I'm just thinking of the unions. I work in tech, you work in the Navy, and it feels like, people in greatness who want to think is pretty applicable to everyone.
It should be, and I'm not a big fan of like no hierarchy and everyone do what they want. I think there needs to be structure, but it's the structure on the right thing. So, for example, like when you're doing a weld, right? There's a certain right way to do a weld, right? But when I look at these companies, there's two. I'll just give away all my consulting advice, right? There's two questions I ask myself. One is, can we make it more human? And two is, can we give the workers more control of their work? So, for example, more human. So I'm looking at a company that does a lot of drug testing. They do testing on animals. And I'm noticing that all the animals are in multi-animal cages. There's always at least one animal every animal can touch at least one other animal. Okay? So these goes from like rats all the way to monkeys. Now, the people working there are working individually. Like the person rolls a card in, and then he's got to test like 20 monkeys or 1,000 rats or something. So they're sitting in there by themselves for 4 hours. And I'm just trying to imagine me being in there and just doing the same thing for 4 hours with no human contact. Like, how horrible would that be? So the experiment with them is, well, can you let's like put two people together, right? The animals always have someone to touch and be in contact with, but the humans don't. They're treating the animals better than the humans. And so can you put two people together? They say, well, we used to do that, but we ran a lean process, and it turns out when you put two people in there, you have to build two cards. So let's say I spend 2 hours on rats and 2 hours on monkeys. I got to spend 2 hours, I got to build two cards for the rats and two cards for the monkeys. So by lean, it's more efficient to just do 1 and 1. But it takes a toll on the people because there's turnover and the people get depressed, and it's a really hard job. So the question number one is, can you make it more human? Can we put people together? And even just one other person makes it. The worst thing we do in prison is what? Solitary confinement. And here we are putting these people in solitary confinement, so to speak. Now, some people do that. There are a small portion of the population that's okay with that, but most people aren't like that. The second thing is, can we give the people more control over their work? So, like, who decides that I come into work today, who decides I'm going to do rats, then I'm going to do rabbits, and I'm going to do monkeys, or what am I going to do? Well, there's like this computer algorithm, and I get a little printout, and it says, I'm going to do this, right? So in other words, I have no control. I guarantee you there's some of those people that just like dealing with rats, right? They don't, rats don't interact that much. They're pretty, they do what they're told. You pick them up, you dose them, you put them back. And so there's probably some people who like dealing with smarter animals like, pigs or the monkeys or something like that, because they're much more interactive and social. And I'm guessing if they said, hey, here's what needs to happen, like, let's do some sort of a eBay sort of bidding thing, they'd get better performance, but it's not the way they're doing. So we're doing these little experiments. And pretty much when I ask those two questions, can we make it more human? Can we give people more control over their work? So like for ship shipbuilding and welding, where I'm doing these welds, I don't give control on how I do the weld, but maybe I like working in a closed tank versus I like working in an open space, or I like welding down versus I like welding over my head, or whatever it happens to be. So rather than just the foreman assigning me to weld over my head, when that's particularly not something that's particularly hard for me, I get to sort of have input.
So I want to go a little left here, more to like your personal life. Where your mission when you're on a Navy ship is really clear. It's to uphold and support the U.S. Constitution.
Right.
What is yours now?
I'm trying to create a community, or I'm trying to help leaders who want to create environments where their people can be great. So I'm not trying to convince people that giving control is the right way to go, because I think there are enough people who sort of innately believe that. And I'm not trying to necessarily change people, but I'm just, through my stories and my personal experience and knowing how hard it was for me, because I always came back to me being the problem and making mistakes, for example, giving too much control without these underlying pillars of competence and clarity. Mostly all I do is just give people the courage to think, yeah, I'm not in it alone. Other people have done this, and oh, by the way, it works. Because the short-term reward system that most of us live in will not reward the kind of behavior that I think is really powerful in the long run. The short-term reward system, for example, that we have in the Navy is I'm evaluated based on how my submarine does while I'm there, up to the day I leave. So the day after I leave, if we got some big problem, it's not my problem, it's the next guy's problem. So because of that, I'm not incentivized to create an organization that continues to perform well or even better after I go. So the motivation for me to train and mentor my people is suppressed. Now, guys do it because it's the right thing to do, but you're sort of overcoming a barrier to the standard short-term incentive program. The Navy is very good about measuring performance, the same as the business world. I get a quarterly scorecard when you work in a public company, probably even more frequent than that. And so what happens is these guys, they sort of, their horizon comes way down here. The power of what we did wasn't manifested until 10 years later when we saw all these guys getting promoted and becoming leaders. Well, 10 years is a long time in a business. And most of the time I'm really not willing to sort of do an experiment that's 10 years long or maybe saying, look, this quarter is going to be less. We're going to spend less time on production this quarter. We'll spend less time production the next quarter. Spend less time production the quarter after that. But trust me, 10 years from now, it's going to all work out, right? That takes a lot of courage. So I just try and help spread the word that if it's true, or if you believe it, it's going to be true.
What's another example? Do you have another story outside of the Navy of you giving control?
Of me giving control?
Yeah.
Well, so when I hired my executive assistant, she came to work and she wanted a list of things to do, right? And I said, I'm not giving you a list of things. I said, first of all, you're going to have to figure out what needs to be done. And again, it was very difficult for both of us because I was frustrated because it took a while for her to actually become sort of useful to me because she had to figure out what needed to be done and then start doing it. And one day she said, we're about a month into it, and she said, I don't understand. Every other place I work, they just give me a list of things to do, and that's what I do. I said, exactly, that's the problem. How motivating was that? How wonderful was that? Well, it wasn't. It sucked. So, and so there's this big investment up front, and but anyway, she's awesome now. But it's hard, and I can't. So many times I just want to go. Okay, look, call this. Okay, send the books here. Do this, right? Send this tweet. And then I go, shit, I'm not living my own thing. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
And then I have my kids, right? My kids are always poking me in the eye. They're like, "Oh, Dad, you're telling, like, look, put on your seatbelt, right? That's a Lego." So it's not like everything is do what you want. And it's, kids are not fully formed human beings, so they got to be told. They don't have an experience of kidnapping. They don't have an experience of gunshots. They don't have an experience of car crashes. So they say, look, you got to put your seatbelt on. But there's some things you can't give them control in, and so we try and do that.
So I want to wrap up here, but I would love to. It seems like you had this epiphany moment because of your own experiences. Who do you look to now? Who like inspires you, and who do you read or interact with and try to surround yourself with to make yourself better?
Well, besides you?
Oh yeah, whatever.
Yeah. I've become good friends with Simon Sinek.
I've interviewed him
in
for
New
Ask.
York. Yeah, and Start With Why, and now Leaders Eat Last. And I can tell you that a lot of these guys have sort of this public persona, which is one way, and the way they treat their people who work closely with them and their friends is different. That's not the way with him. It's exactly how he is. He's the most genuine. He's genuine, caring, authentic guy I've met. I was a huge fan of Stephen Covey, and it was really sad to see him pass away last year, or I guess the year before that. I like the stuff that Adam Grant does. I don't know Adam personally. We've had sort of a little bit of an electronic relationship. He just came out with this article in the New York Times, I think it was Sunday Times, on how to raise moral kids. I find his stuff to be very thoughtful and makes sense. I guess that's kind of my short list.
Those are great. I've never heard of Adam Grant.
Yeah, he's on the East Coast. It's a long way for you.
Yeah, unless it's through Skype.
Now, his book is called Give and Take.
Give and Take?
Yeah, he's a professor at Wharton. The book's called Give and Take, and it's a great book. It's about basically the people's relationship to how they perceive their relationships with others. In other words, are they givers or takers? Do they give without caring? Are they giving with the idea that some day later I'm going to take, or are they just takers? And so it's kind of like which of those approaches, so to speak, is successful in the long run.
Awesome. Well, I just wanted to say thank you. This interview is great. I love your whole story, and congrats again on getting your book to be part of the curriculum for the Navy. That's incredible.
Yeah, thank you. Really.
And everyone, pick up David's book. It's called Turn the Ship Around. And you're in New York, right?
Yeah, I tell the IRS I live in Florida, but I have an apartment in New York, and
Probably
I hang out there just as long as I can. Yeah. Delete this part, but just as much as I can until I run up against a problem with the IRS.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and have a great day, man.
All right. Thanks, Shane Mack.